although there are talks about reintroducing the golden eagle to the rest of Britain. And it's already been done with the white-tailed eagle, so why not the golden eagle? And of course, the golden eagle avoids humans, so it tries to keep as far away from people as possible. I mean, its habitats can be quite easy. You mostly see them out in the Highlands of Scotland, where they soar over the rugged, beautiful terrain, patrolling their territory. Of course, it is very unlikely that you'll see a golden eagle beside a roadside telegraph pole or tree. Such a bird might potentially be a buzzard. Of course, if you ever see a golden eagle at close quarters, or get one in range of your binoculars or telescope, you'll see it has a beak like a butcher's cleaver, large yellow feet with thick talons like kitchen knives, and pale golden buff-like feathers. Of course, when the bird is in flight, it can be distinguished from a buzzard by the longer head and neck, larger tail, and the S shape of the trailing edge of its longer wings. And of course, golden eagles feed on a wide range of prey. In fact, they eat anything from like grasshoppers, fish, but their usual live prey are game birds, mountain or brown hares, and rabbits. And they've even been known to tackle prey as big as deer, which is absolutely phenomenal. Of course, in the harsh winter months, golden eagles rely heavily on dead meat, mostly feeding on the carcasses of animals that failed to survive the difficult conditions of the bleak mountains. This is mainly red deer and sheep. And golden eagles, when they hunt, of course, first what they do is they soar high above the terrain. They scan for their prey. In fact, they have eyesight that's 8 times more powerful than ours, so they could spot a hare from well over a kilometre away. And of course, then they will dive after it. And of course, they can match the same speed as a peregrine at about 200 miles per hour. And then, once they've got close to their prey, they swing their talons forward and stab into it with their kitchen knife-like talons. And it's actually said the more their prey struggles, the tighter the grip will get. And I've actually held a golden eagle on my wrist at a falconry centre, but I will talk about that in a minute. And of course, golden eagle, unfortunately, its only 2 weaknesses when it comes to hunting is that its vision is mostly based around movement. So in thick grass or heather, a hare could easily disappear, but also the eagle can't turn as sharp as a hare without risking a possible life-threatening injury. And of course, golden eagles mate for life, and they will return to the same nest whenever possible. The pair usually produce about 2 chicks, but quite often it's the only one chick, which is the strongest and healthiest one that survives. But in rare occasions, both chicks make it to adulthood. In fact, a golden eagle's nest, or eyrie, is a very large structure which can be reused each breeding season. The eagles just repair it where needed and add a fresh lining. As I mentioned earlier that I have held a golden eagle before, I will tell you now, because I held a golden eagle a few years ago when I was at a falconry centre, and she was a female, and of course her name was Freya, and tragically at the age of 5 she was shot in the wing by a farmer who claimed he was worried for his livestock. But of course he ended up going to jail because golden eagles are protected by law and killing them is an offence. And she was a very heavy bird, and of course her grip strength on my hand was absolutely ferocious. In fact, her handler had actually said if I hadn't been wearing the thick leather gauntlet, she would probably be crushing every bone in my hand. And that's mainly down to the fact that this is a bird that specialises mostly in feeding on mammals, so the talons have a very formidable grip strength. They're very, very thick, and of course, and when I was holding her, and I actually moved my thumb a little, and she just gripped even tighter, and it felt like she was trying to crush my hand to pulp. And when her handler asked if I was okay, I said, moved my hand just slightly. He said, oh yeah, in fact, in the wild, the more their prey struggles, the tighter the grip gets. It can actually crush the bones of a rabbit or a hare. I was like, you don't say. And of course, Freya, she just looked at me all like, I know, I did it. And she was like, I'm just showing you what I can do. And of course, golden eagles don't get to mate themselves until they're at the age of 3 or 4, and only a quarter of young birds are lived that long, as life in the mountains is harsh. I mean, although they are protected by law, golden eagles are still being persecuted by egg thieves, hunters, gamekeepers, and quite often farmers who see them as a threat to livestock. But, in truth, the birds don't take healthy farm animals, and the only reason they're blamed for livestock predation is quite often when they're seen feeding on sheep carcasses. And of course, golden eagles are very well protected, and anyone who's caught harming them, be that farmer or gamekeeper, despite what they claim, is sent to prison for a very long time with their shooting licence permanently revoked, and of course with a large fine of a fair few £1,000s. Of course, this is the range of golden eagle. As I said, there are talks about bringing the golden eagle back to England and Wales, like with the white-tailed eagle, but of course that's for another day. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you all is probably our most numerous animal. This is the red fox. Now, red foxes are in the dog family, so the same family as wolves, coyotes, and wild dogs, but they are also one of the most adaptable animals on the planet. In fact, there's probably more foxes living in cities than there are living in the countryside. Of course, red foxes, they mostly live out in the countryside, where, like in woodland, farmland, heathland, moorland, of course, but they can go and live in cities, which makes them rural foxes and urban foxes. Of course, the male is usually bigger than the female, and a rural fox, which is one that lives out in the country, because rural foxes usually mate for life, but an urban fox, quite often, they will only join briefly to mate. Foxes that live out in the countryside, because when they pair for life, they will quite often dig their own burrow or hole in a hill, and that's called an earth. And of course, it can be a couple of miles down, and they usually give birth to a litter of usually about 5 to 8 kits. And usually when the female is nursing them, it's the male's job to provide them with food. Because foxes are known to feed on anything. In fact, they will eat voles, rats, and mice, but also rabbits and game birds, waterfowl, pretty much anything they can catch. But of course, foxes do occasionally go for livestock, especially chickens, because foxes are quite popularised in hunting chickens, which I think is incredibly unfair. But also, a lot of it is not that true. Foxes don't go for chickens unless the farmer or chicken owner is being incredibly stupid and leaving them out of the run at night. But of course, foxes have also been seen in urban areas going through people's garbage. But of course, what's another thing about foxes is that they're also very, very cunning. As the saying goes, as cunning as a fox. And that's partly down to the fact that foxes have learned one of the best ways to avoid being seen is to come out at night time. And quite often at night, they make us, and it's usually the males that do this when they're trying to attract a female, they let off a loud barking sound, and it's absolutely horrible. I mean, to us it might not sound very pleasant, but to the females it's very attractive. And of course, I've never seen a fox properly in the wild before. I mean, I've only caught like fleeting glimpses of them. I mean, they're not endangered at all. There are thousands of them in the British Isles, but a lot of people rarely see them as they're very shy and very elusive and mostly nocturnal, which means they're active at night. And of course, I know that there are foxes around where I live, I just rarely see them. Of course, here is the fox's range. Now, the next animal I'm going to show you is another one of our most dramatic birds of prey. It is the osprey. Now, ospreys are migrant birds. In fact, they can fly. They fly all the way from sub-Saharan Africa to be in Europe in the spring. And of course, like all birds of prey, they mate for life, and they usually nest on a cliff face or on the top of a high tree, like a conifer tree, and they can build an enormous nest. The nest is usually enormous, probably about the size of a two-person sofa. And they usually have about 3 chicks, and of course ospreys are very unique in that they specialise in hunting one thing, fish, which means they're piscivora or ichthyophagous, which is fish eaters. And it's very, very, very obvious. I mean, when looking at the talons of an osprey, in fact, they're long, thin, and curved like fish hooks, and that enables them to keep a hold of wet, slippery fish. And another thing about ospreys is that how they hunt is that they will quite often hover above the surface of a lake or a river. And once they spot a fish, they will dive down, swing their talons forward, and slam into the water and grab a fish. And they can incredibly carry fish out that are about 8 times their own weight. So it'd be a lot like me diving into a lake and pulling out a bag of metal that would be probably 5 times my body weight. And then they will quite often bring their catch back to their nest to feed their chicks. Ospreys are actually starting to make a dramatic recovery in the British Isles, because This is a bird that was hunted almost to